Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate on a new night, Wednesday nights from now on at 6:30. And I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm very happy to have as my guest tonight, Clifford Chally, and you're going to hear all about his multiple careers in the world of design. So welcome, Cliff.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And a lot of you who come to St. James already know Cliff because he's a parishioner and also an expert thurifer, right?
Bingo.
You're one of those experts who can do a figure eight and loop-de-loop and all of that, can't you?
John Thies taught me how to be a thurifer.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
But he did.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I'm just so grateful that you're at St. James. It's such a joy to serve with you and to know you. But I want to back up and find out. I don't really know very much at all about where you started out. So my first question is, are you a native Californian?
No, I am not. I grew up in Texas. And my family lived part of the time in Fort Worth, where I went to South Hills Elementary School, the same school that John Gibson went to.
Wow.
We didn't know each other then, but we made that connection at St. James actually when he first started.
Like we have quite a few former Texans at St. James. I wonder if that's a breeding ground for people with a taste for high liturgy.
I don't know. That's a good question. But we also lived in the Rio Grande Valley down in South Texas, and then my family settled in Austin. And in fact, they're still there. My brother still lives there.
Okay, so your family's very much part of Texas, and yet here you are in California. So how did you find your way to California?
Well, when I graduated from high school, I started college down there at University of Texas in Edinburgh. And from there, went into the Navy for 4 years, and decided pretty much when I got out that I wanted to go to school for fashion. And so I went to Paris. I found a school, and I couldn't get a carte de séjour to earn a living, and I couldn't use my GI Bill because it was a trade school in a foreign economy. So I had to come back to the U.S. to go to school.
Wait, the GI Bill, you couldn't get the GI Bill to pay because it was Paris or because it was a trade school?
No, because it was on a foreign economy. It was a trade school on a foreign economy.
Oh.
I could have gone to Sorbonne, but not to the design school because they wouldn't pay for that. So I ended up coming to L.A. And I was going to school here. That's how I got to Los Angeles.
I see. And did you grow up Episcopalian?
No.
No. Does everybody grow up Episcopalian? I'm beginning to wonder.
Well, my parents were very active in their church. My dad was an elder, and we were part of the Christian church. We went to South Hills Christian in Fort Worth, and then Christian church everywhere else in Texas. It's part of the UCC.
Okay.
And so
in New England, we call that congregational, I think.
No, this is different. This is not the same. And so that was our church. And once, when I was 9 years old and in the third grade, my next door neighbors in Fort Worth invited me to church. And I went to my mom and said, "Can I go with them?" And she said, "Sure." So off we went, and they belonged to this church called St. Matthew's, which was across from TCU, Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. And it was a pretty little stone church. And we walked in, and you got on your knees to pray, and you sat down and you stood up to sing, and there was incense, and there was stained glass, and there were vestments, and music and all of this, and I was on sensory overload. Our church didn't have anything like this.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away. 9 years old, and my eyes were bugging. So we got home, and my mom said, "Oh, so how was it?" And I said, "Oh, Mom, I have finally been to church." And she looked at me, and I said, I think I want to join this church. And she said, oh, honey, we have our own church.
Oh, wow.
And as sweet as her response was, I knew that that was a war that I would never win, and we dropped it and never talked about it again. So then, after getting out of the Navy and coming to LA, most of the time I would go to the beach with my friends on Sundays. I didn't go to church at all. And or I'd go to brunch. There's all kinds of things to do on Sunday. And once a friend said, you want to go to church? And I went, yeah, sure. So we went, and it was St. James.
Oh.
We walked in, and there was the stained glass and the incense and the vestments, and you're on your knees and you're singing and the music and everything, all those feelings just washed right over me again. And by the time the service was over, I thought, you know what? I don't have to leave. And I never have.
Oh, I love that.
No, that's the truth. That's how I got to St. James.
That's amazing. And that was, and was that a long time ago or fairly recently? I'm not asking you to date yourself, but.
No, recently. It was in 79.
You've been at St. James since 79?
Yep.
Amazing. So that was more or less when you were first getting started in your career here in LA. Or maybe
I actually got started before that, but I was pretty well on my way at that point.
And this career, friends, is amazing. Your first job out of college, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Was working with Bob Mackey?
Well, I was on staff at CBS at TV City on Beverly and Fairfax. And so part of the job, and I was in the wardrobe department. And part of the job that you had was whenever there needed to be extra hands on one of the productions, you would go in and fill in. And so I worked on all the shows that came through the door. And it was Carol Burnett and Cher and Tony Orlando and Dawn and all the other variety shows that came through the door. We worked on all of them.
That's amazing. So you were CBS as opposed to, I wonder if it's still that way or if it's more individual shows have their own.
Well, they do have their own, but they always need extra, and they'll just contract that from the.
I see.
Yeah.
So what was it like to work with Bob Mackey?
Well, it was great fun. My first job with him was not at CBS.
Oh, really?
When I was still in school, he got a contract for building the biggest musical show, or the musicale. It was just like a big review in Vegas. It was one of the big Vegas shows for the new opening of the MGM Grand they were still building it.
Oh my!
So they were hiring. His shop was hiring anybody that could walk and hold something. They would hire them. So that's how I got in. And so I worked with him on that show. And then when that was finished, through his recommendation, I got a job at CBS on staff.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that's why you were at CBS, and then you were, yeah. And I remember watching those variety shows when I was young and just being dazzled by the glamour. I remember, the way that Cher looked in all the different gowns that she wore on her show. I don't think I'd ever seen such sort of slinky elegance, you know?
Yeah.
It must have been quite something to work with these individuals.
Oh, it was great fun. We had a ball. Uh-huh. And the minute you walked in the door, you could just feel the adrenaline level shoot up. It was because the orchestras were all rehearsing. Oh, show night was always on Fridays. And all the shows would have their tapings on the same evening. And so there were audiences lined up around the building to get in, and all the orchestras were rehearsing. So it was really exciting.
Sounds exciting. And so you were doing this kind of work, and then what was the first show that was sort of your show?
Well, after CBS, I left and went to work for the film studios.
Mm-hmm.
And the first show that I worked on that I had the most to do with was Heart to Heart with Robert Wagner
and Stephanie
Powers.
Powers. Oh, yes. I used to watch that show too.
They had been on the air for a couple of years. I did the last 2 seasons with them.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. And then from there, I went to work for Aaron Spelling.
Oh, yeah?
And I worked on a bunch of shows that his studio was set up like the old studio system, and he had a resident designer, which was Nolan Miller. And then there were wardrobe people that staffed all the different shows, but Nolan did all the designing. And that concept has sort of evolved into what it is today, where the designer today is responsible for the look of the show, whether it's rented or bought or designed and made. The design is really the look of the show. It's not just sitting down and sketching up a dress. So that role has evolved over the years, and now fortunately, there's costume designer on practically every production that's out there.
Yeah. So what kind of shows were you doing with Aaron Spelling?
I worked on Dynasty. I worked on Love Boat. My show was called Glitter. It was about a magazine, entertainment magazine, and it only lasted for 1 season. But the way his production company was set up, whoever was swamped that week, everybody else would go help them. So we all worked on each other's show, all back and forth.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So far, I feel like a through line, I don't know if this is true or not, but a through line in your work was that you were really in the glamour end of costume design, right?
Well,
you weren't designing like cowboy outfits and...
No, some people specialize. At the beginning, you just take whatever comes to you.
Right,
and what came to me were all of these opportunities. So that's really what I learned. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really my choice. It's just that's what I learned. So
okay.
That became my experience, and that's what I used when I was on my own shows.
Right. Because a particular job begets another job like that, right?
Right. And when I was at Spelling, I got a call from a producer who wanted to hire me as a costume designer. And I was really conflicted because I was very happy working at Spelling. That was a great bunch of people. And Nolan Miller and I were great friends, and I was working for him. He was the designer. And so I went to him and I told him what had happened, that somebody had called and I was torn about. He said, "If that's what you want to do, you need to go." And he just pushed me out the door in the gentlest, most supportive way, and that's how it started.
That's amazing. And is that how you ended up on doing Designing Women?
Well, there were other shows in between, but I got a call from some people that I knew at Columbia Pictures TV, which was based over on the Warner's lot, and they were looking for a designer to do this series, and so I interviewed for them, and they hired me, and then we just started out, and that show ran for 7 years.
Is that what the Designing Women?
That's Designing Women, yeah.
Yes. Can you bring up a photograph, Justin? I wonder if, just to remind people, this show was, I think, very significant because it was about women's friendships. I mean, it was comedy, it was drama, but I mean, I don't know if there'd been that many television shows that focused on the sort of bonds between women. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was also a show about women in the South, specifically, because they were based in Atlanta. And so all the writing was had a Southern, tilt to it. And it was a tough show because you never had more than 3 days to prepare the entire show before it was aired.
That's mind-boggling. Look at all those women. And they weren't the only characters,
and
right?
Sometimes they would have 4 or 5 changes in every show. So multiply that by 4 people plus guest cast.
Yeah.
And you could pull together 30, 40 outfits in 3 days.
And so that means fitting them as well, right?
Pardon?
That means fitting them, right?
Fitting them, altering them, everything. And so you kept the workroom pretty busy, with all this stuff going in and out.
Yes.
And even if you tried to get a jump on the show, I remember being in the makeup room one night, and one of the girls said, "Okay," because the writer Linda Bloodworth Thomason, who was the producer, was in the makeup room with us, and they said, "Linda, what's the show about next week?" And she'd go, "Oh, I don't know. What should I write about? What should we talk about?
Oh my gosh.
What do you want to talk about?" Because the way she would write the show, she'd wait until Sunday night and she'd watch 60 minutes, turn off the television, and out the script came.
Amazing. It was topical. It was topical.
Always, which is why there was such an enormous following to that show.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think it was maybe it was on the same night as Murphy Brown, which is another topical show back then, right?
Right.
Yeah, what an amazing experience that must have been. Now, there's another photograph that we have of you, and you're dressing not a human but a pig. It looks like. Can you?
That's Noel. Noel. In the script, we opened the script. We always read the script on Monday morning at the cast reading, and then we had from the time you get up from the script reading until Thursday was dress rehearsal. So the time in between is when you had to pull the show together, and everybody would run off and do what they were going to do. Well, we opened the script one day, and for Christmas, Suzanne, who was Delta Burke, was given a pig, and she named it Noel. And the script said that Noel and Suzanne come in the door in matching outfits. So I made a dress for Delta, but then we had to make a dress for this pig. Well,
how do you fit a pig, right?
That wasn't the problem. The problem was getting somebody to make it because it was a dress. The tailors didn't want to touch it. They said, "No, we don't do dresses." And the women said, "No, it's a pig. We won't." The seamstresses wouldn't touch it because it was a pig. So it went back and forth in the wardrobe department. Finally, I convinced the tailors to help me out and do this. So we did, and it's the same color as Delta's, but it's red spandex with Velcro down the back. And when we got ready to shoot, the trainer brought the pig out, and we were trying to get this dress on it, and it's squealing bloody murder, going wee, wee, like this. You could hear it all over the place. And so we finally got this, we were trying to get this thing on this pig, and this grip was standing outside smoking a cigarette, and he looked over at me and said, "I don't think she likes the color."
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. But
there's another photograph from that.
Cool. The show was full of stuff like that.
It sounds like it was fun, but so hectic those 3 days each week. Yeah. But it also sounds like maybe by the weekend you could relax a little bit.
We did. It was the most fun I ever had on a show, really.
Oh, and the actresses must have been really interesting to get to know.
They were fun. We had a great time.
There's one more photograph, Justin, of Cliff with Annie Potts and Dixie Watley. Is that her name?
Dixie Carter.
Dixie Carter, right. And maybe that's going to come up on the screen. They look like they're pretending to be Joan Crawford. And
we did a spoof on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Oh, yeah.
And so
the horror movie, sort of late in the careers of Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, right?
Right.
That's wonderful. And look at handsome you there. Wow. So so Designing Women, that was you were Emmy nominated for that show. So that
I have that show. I got 4 nominations.
wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
I had another one before that for another show that I did. So I have 5 altogether.
So so what an interesting career. Plenty of excitement for one life, and yet at the same time you've got this other career. You're known across the United States and I would bet the world as a designer of vestments. And first of all, let's just define, in case anybody's going to watch this who doesn't know our terminology, what are vestments?
Vestments are garments that are worn by clergy to assist in the worship service and liturgy.
Yeah, but then also, I think also the service participants too, right? When they wear robes, those are vestments too, right?
Right.
So the garments that clergy and the other servers wear, and so then you became a designer of vestments. How in the world did that happen?
Well, I was busy on my shows, and at St. James, the first set that we needed to replace was our green set. Mm-hmm. And they were complaining about, and I was part of the altar guild, and so I would always hear about all this stuff, and they said, well, we need a new green set. And I thought, well, I think maybe I could do that. And I started looking into it, and I did some research and made a couple of proposals to them and did some sketches and some ideas, and found somebody to make them and did. And the response was pretty positive. And it was really rewarding for me. So
is this the green set the green set that we use even today?
Yeah.
I wonder, Justin, if you could call up the top section of that montage that we created of some of Cliff's work, so that we can look at the green set.
The one on the lower left.
On the lower left, I think that gentleman in the middle is Father Paul Kowaleski.
That's correct.
And I don't know who the folks on the left and the right are. But anyway, the green, you designed that, and you had your tailors or your seamstresses make it.
Well, I didn't have any at that time. This is the very first set that I made, and I had there was a company that I was working with, and I had them do it, and it turned out beautifully.
Yes,
and so it was really well received, and so I thought, well, maybe this is something that I could do when I retire from television. Mm-hmm. And over the years, it eclipsed what I was doing in television, and that's all I did.
So it just sort of, the television work started to feel less important, and then the vestment design more.
And the vestment business grew.
Yeah.
So there was more of it. So I had less time for anything else. So, and then not long after that, I retired from the industry.
So I'm guessing that a lot of people who are going to listen to this interview have never really stopped to think about what goes into designing vestments. They might just think, oh, it needs to be a certain color, but there's so much more to it. So I'm wondering, maybe we could have that, the montage back up again, and we can use some of those photographs as examples, and maybe you could just take us through, how do you approach a request? A church comes to you and says, we want green vestments, right? Mm-hmm. How do you make decisions? Like, how did you make the design decisions you made for our green set?
Well, if possible, I always try to go sit in the space where they're going to be used. because the space will tell you what it wants.
I love that. The space will tell you what it wants. So what does St. James's space tell you that it wants?
Well, look at the setting.
Mm-hmm.
It's traditional, it's Gothic, and to me, when you impose things that are not of that period,
Mm-hmm.
they clash, they don't marry. And I always want my things to marry with the setting where they're going to be. And that's from working with production designers over the years, where the costumes have to marry with the sets. It's the same thing in church. Church is theater. It's exactly the same thing.
So that's fascinating that the design principles are the same.
Yeah.
So you want it to marry. So
with your surroundings.
Does that mean it should or shouldn't take center stage?
Well, they shouldn't. They shouldn't take center stage, and they should never upstage the people who are wearing them.
Or so that I don't want to be wearing a vestment that's wearing me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've all been places where the vestments were the stars and the people were incidental, and that's, to me, that misses the mark.
Yes. Yeah, it does. You know, Comfort is in the chat, and she says, what do you consider your favorite part of being a designer?
I think the new challenge is different from the challenge. It's just like in the entertainment business, and the thing that was so fun about that was that every script was completely different. You never knew what to expect. Mm-hmm. And if they could spell it, they asked for it. You had to come up with it. Well, it's the same investments. I mean, every project is completely different than one before. The parameters are a little bit smaller, but they're all unique situations. And so
it sounds like it's that challenge that's fun.
It is. It's great fun for me.
And Jim Buonamani is in the chat as well. And he's asking for you to tell us a little bit about the choir vestments that you designed for us at St. James.
Well, those were actually, I collaborated with him, and we did that together. And we, at the time, we had, when they were brand new, when we first started using them, I think it was before the choir went to England for the first time. Mm-hmm. And there was a Korean family in the parish that had a garment factory down in the garment district.
Oh.
And so my cutter made all the patterns, made a set of commercial patterns for this. We figured out how we wanted it to work and how to open them and the sleeves and the design of the whole thing. I took the patterns down with the fabric to this factory, and this Korean family made the entire set as a gift to the church.
Wow.
So that was a huge gift from them. And I never met them. I didn't know who they were, but they are the ones that did that first. We supplied the patterns and the fabric, and then they manufactured the whole set. And then Jim has added to that in the years since. Whenever he needs to, we'll add more to it. But that's how they first started.
So before we move on from talking about St. James, Comfort has another interesting question, which is, and by the way, Comfort also has a background in design, and I think she's very, very on your wavelength here. She says, in the absence of air conditioning, what considerations do you use when designing vestments?
I don't think I've ever designed for a place that didn't have air conditioning.
Well, except
St. James does. Yeah, St. James doesn't have air conditioning. We got very close, and that may happen at some point, but it hasn't yet. Most of the places I do work for, they do have air conditioning, but you always try to keep them as light as possible, whether a place is air conditioned or not. The vestments should be, you want them to be comfortable. And most clergy are already wearing 2 or 3 layers underneath anyway, because there's an alb, there's usually a clergy shirt or slacks or a dress, and so, or a cassock. So the more you put on, the warmer they get. So you want the outer layer to be as light as possible.
And I think that probably makes it flow better too. I mean, just hang more beautifully.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the fabrics that you use too.
Jim is just doubling back to that question about the choir vestments, and he says that many other choirs have modeled their vestments on ours. He says you're a genius, Cliff.
You're very kind, Jim. Thanks.
But you know, we've been talking about how you've designed for this neo-Gothic space, St. James, but you've also designed for very different churches. And I wonder if we could bring up the photographs again. And this time there's a middle section with some really interesting, unusual designs. So I'm thinking on the top right-hand corner there, this is a church. It looks modern. There's blonde wood and the colors. Tell us about that.
This church is St. Matthew's out in Pacific Palisades. It was built, I think, in the 80s.
Oh, that's St. Matthew's. Oh, wow. I love that church.
And that they wanted something in their new white set that evoked water because they were near the ocean. And we worked, I submitted several designs over and over and over again, and nothing was quite right. And I said, why don't we lift the colors from your kneelers? Because they have kneelers all the way around the communion rail that are done in needlepoint, and you can see them in that photograph. And so they thought, well, let's use those colors. So I used all of the colors that are in those kneelers, and I designed a pattern on silk that didn't copy the pattern, but it kind of went with it. Gave it to my textile artist. She wet the silk and threw the dye out all over it and moved it around, and that's how it came out.
So beautiful. It's so beautiful.
This set was really complex because we had to make the patterns, then we had to mark the patterns on the silk, then it went to her to be dyed according to my sketches, then it came back, then it went to the embroiders to be embroidered over that, then it came back, and then they were assembled and then delivered. So it was a really complicated project, but it was great fun. And the result is beautiful, I think.
And any of you who've ever visited St. Matthew's Pacific Palisades, you know that it's such a different kind of space than St. James. In fact, I think it's circular, isn't it? But
it's very wide.
Very wide and curvy.
And shallow. It's wider than it is deep.
Yeah, just a very different feel, very modern compared to how we worship. So
and that's why they
told you that's what I wanted, huh?
Well, but the vestments are much more modern because that's what that space asks for, in my opinion. That's what they want. I mean, the space will always tell you what it should be.
Well, it'll tell you.
It's a much sleeker, more contemporary, simple design as opposed to some of the other things that I've done.
Yes.
Now the one on the left.
Yes. Can we have it back up again, please, Justin? The one on the top left or bottom left?
Top left. That is a very simple frontal because the background behind the altar is all stained glass.
Very pretty.
This is their Advent set. And so that the only thing on that altar is the Star of Bethlehem.
I know, and it's just gorgeous.
The rays go all the way across the front of the altar.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And then in the bottom left, there's a very beautiful cross design. I'm not sure you can see it. It might be too small. But it's
bottom left?
Yeah, the green. It's very beautiful.
That is that is a cross. There are some bigger pictures of that same cross that you have up. The one with the cope, with a red cope.
Oh.
That is the same cross. It's the same church. And that is St. Mark's in Los Olivos, north of Santa Barbara. And I designed this cross for them. And it is, no, it's not, it's in one of your other, your other montage. Oh, in the center of this one.
Oh, I see it. That beautiful cope. Can you define the word cope for the folks at home?
Cope is a procession garment that is used by clergy, can be worn by either anyone who's ordained, bishops or regular clergy, priests. This design I did for them. They wanted a new white set, and the arms of the cross are wheat and grapes for the sacraments. But there's a wreath of olives around that's hard to see. You can't see it in this photograph, but you can see it in person. And that cross is uniquely for St. Mark's. And there's also a winged lion in the center of the cross. So that cross belongs to St. Mark's. Nobody else will ever have it. Nobody else will ever use it.
Beautiful.
It's their cross.
How do you get all that engraving done?
Engraving? You mean?
Embroidery.
Well, my embroiderer does it. And my embroiderer scans the image into the computer and digitizes it. So then by that time, once it's digitized, we can blow it up, we can shrink it down, and it can make adjustments for the different sizes. Add stitches, take stitches away, but you get the same image.
Amazing. There's another cope in this collection of photographs, and it's multicolored and very unusual. I wonder, just one more story, can you tell us about that? That
cope was made for this priest, whose name is Jerry Anderson. He lives in Santa Barbara now. He was the the word just went right out of my head. He was at
yeah. He was he at Good Sam?
Yeah, Good Samaritan. Yeah, he was the chaplain there. And he had always wanted a cope of many colors. And the first thing that came to mind was, it's going to look like a circus tent.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it and worked on it. And I said, what in nature has all the colors? Well, it's a rainbow. So my textile artist airbrushed a rainbow so that it went over his shoulders and from him to him on both sides. So that was his cope of many colors.
It's beautiful. So I guess I just want to dig a little deeper. Why is it important to get this stuff right? Why is it important for vestments to express the space and all of that? What's really going on?
Well, I think it's like all clothes. They send messages, unspoken, but they're very clear. And the other thing is, people stare at them. I mean, you don't just glance at them and walk away. You're staring at, this step is up there and you're paying attention. You're looking at it. And you look at it over and over and over again. So it needs to be right.
And how does it, I mean, I know that it does. I'm just wanting to hear this in your words, I think. How does it deepen our experience of worship? I'm thinking about 9-year-old you now, back in on that visit to the Episcopal Church. What is it that that the colors and the fabrics and the movement and the images, what does it do in worship?
For me, it is specific to the space. You don't see those anywhere else but church. And vestments always take away the individual, so that we're not paying attention to what you decided to wear that morning, what you decided, because it's not about that. It's really about the worship.
Okay, so this is interesting because earlier you said that the vestments can't wear me, right?
Right.
They can't take over, but at the same time, there's something that they're doing that's de-individualizing in a healthy way for worship.
Yeah. Sort of.
I know I'm not saying it very well because I think it's a complicated balance, right?
It is. It is.
It make me the most fabulous chasuble. Let's define the word chasuble. Chasuble is, it's like a poncho in a way, isn't it? You could make me the most dazzling, fabulous chasuble in the world, but that might not be appropriate. Well,
a lot of that depends on you and how you feel in it. I had a fun project years ago that I didn't get the project, but I had a blast doing it. It was really fun. I was one of 5 in the country that were invited to submit designs for the papal visit. And so when I started doing the research on it, I would look at all these papal masses around the world. There was one in the Philippines and Brazil and all over the place. And it was always so hard to find the Pope because everybody was dressed alike. They were all in mitres and white chasubles, and you couldn't see this one, you couldn't see that one. And so I had a hard time finding it. And I thought, well, if I were doing this, I would do it differently. And so when we were working on this, is Justin there?
Yes.
Ask him to put up, Justin, there you go. And this is what I did for the Pope's visit to Philadelphia. The color scheme they wanted was gold and white. And so I put all of the other priests in chasubles and mitres that were coming, and all the bishops from all over the country that were coming. I put them all in gold chasubles with white orphreys, which is exactly what they wanted. They wanted gold and white. But the Pope, I put in a white chasuble with gold orphrey. So no matter where he moved in the space or in the service, you'd know exactly which one was the Pope. So it's completely different than how they usually do things. When we made this presentation, there's a close-up of the cross that I designed for this, and that's it.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
And this cross is when at the presentation, they were all gathered around, and we said, the arms of this cross are the state flowers and trees of Pennsylvania. And the center of the cross is the symbol for the Franciscans, which is what the Pope is. And so literally, this is the Pope in Pennsylvania. And they all went, oh! And they gasped, and they loved it. Now,
it's a very beautiful design, and that's such a great example of how specific this design work is for a church, for a diocese, for a state, however.
Right. And this was designed, this would be used for that one time and then never again, but it was specifically for this event. And although I didn't get the commission. I mean, they had somebody in Europe that was going to do all of these, but I was very flattered to be asked.
Yes, and it's such a beautiful drawing too.
Well, the drawing, if you go back to the drawing of the Pope, which is there, Lois d'Armand was
tonight.
my illustrator, and she did illustrations for me all through my career in television. And so when I got this, I said, Lois, we got to do this. And so she did. She bailed me out, and this is what we sent them. Her work is beautiful.
Back for a minute to when I was
I lost you. I can't hear you. Now I can hear you.
I just wanted to share with you that Jim had something to add to the idea of about vestments. He said perhaps it could be said that vestments
as what? I lost you.
As all art.
Sorry.
Microphone is not working.
Now I heard that.
Should I switch to my phone?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay. For some reason, friends, I'm coming and going. Sorry about that. Okay. So do I leave right now and then come back?
No, now I can hear you.
Goodness, this is so crazy. I don't know why. I don't need to log out of this. I just log on. 1 second. Sorry, everybody. You know.
Yes. How poetic. Beautifully said, Jim. Thank you. Well, it's very different from my Protestant background. That's true.
How's that?
Okay, we're good.
So, all right. So now you can hear me, right?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about all that. It seems like every one of these shows has some new piece of learning for me. Yeah, Jim did say that very poetically, and it's great to hear more about that process. I'm wondering if we can just look one more time at the montage, the sort of bottom level, to see if there are any other images that we want to unpack. You said another word recently, and that was orphrey. Can you tell us what that is? Orphrey?
Orphreys are the bands that go down the sides of the cope. They're also the bands that are on the frontal. They're on your stoles where the cross is embroidered. Those are called orphreys. All of those are orphreys.
Orphreys. It's such a, there's so many funny words, aren't there, in the world of vestments? What would you say is your favorite project that you've ever worked on in liturgical design?
Well, one of them is the Chapel of Resurrection at St. James. And there are a couple of pictures of those. That was before. That's what it used to look like. You might not have ever seen this, Kate.
No, I have.
This is what the chapel used to look like. And years and years and years and years ago, when I was on the building committee, and that was one of the things that I did at St. James. I was on the bill and eventually chaired the building committee for a long time. And one time we were in coffee hour and the kids came out of their group with these bookends that they had made out of all this carved wood. And the carved wood that they used was stuff that we were given when the cathedral was torn down downtown. St. James was given a couple of boxes of beautiful carved wood that had been taken out of the sanctuary, and they gave it to us. And so the leaders of the youth group took the kids, and then they pulled some of this wood out and cut it up and made bookends out of it. I couldn't believe it. So I gathered up all the stuff that was left in the boxes, because there were a couple of them, stole them. And I took them home, and they lived in my garage over 20 years. And when we got ready to do redo the chapel, I brought them back, and my friend Rhett, who designed the chapel today, I gave him all this wood and said, we've got to incorporate all of this into the new reredos in the new chapel, because that's what we've been saving it for. So the chapel went from this to what you see now, and there we are doing it, putting it together. This was during the installation. The reredos had just been put in, and we were doing all the gold leafing.
Can you tell folks what a reredos is?
Reredos is the panel of carving that's behind the altar, under the window.
So beautiful, so beautiful. You designed that? I didn't know that you designed that. Amazing.
I didn't design it. Rhett designed it. That's his profession. He designs churches, interiors of, redesigns the interiors of churches. And so he took all of this carved wood that I gave him and incorporated it into this reredos. And that shot is of us doing the gold leafing once it was installed.
Wonderful. That's amazing. So just one more pass at this idea of the design principles. Let me see if I've got it now. So it's the space will tell you what it needs, and it can't overpower, but it brings everything together in a sort of in a complementary way, right? I mean, give me an example of what would terrible vestments be? Give me an example of what terrible vestments would be.
Well, there's a website called worstvestments.com, and I'm on it.
No way are you on it.
I'm very proud to. Yes.
Oh, you're proud to be on it? Why are you?
Well, because I think it's hilarious. But anyway.
There's also a website for preaching called Ship of Fools. I hope I don't ever end up on there.
Well, To me, one of the things about St. James is that, and this goes back to what I said when I first came in there, and all those feelings kept washed back over me that I had earlier, is that to me, that setting calls for all of us, and always has called for all of us to bring the very best that we can to the glory of God. I mean, that setting demands that to me, and you can't be happy with anything less. But that's why we have superb preaching, we have superb music, we have superb liturgy. Everyone brings the very best that they can to that space. I think the space calls for it. I mean, just to look around the windows, there's 3 generations of the same family have put work into getting those windows into our space. That's really precious.
It is.
That to me is a pretty serious commitment on not on their part, but on our part too. You know, it means that we're serious about what we do.
Right.
And nothing but the very best to me is appropriate.
What a beautiful sort of way to wrap up this conversation. This idea that the space asks us to bring the very best that we can to glorify God. It's an extraordinary place, isn't it? An extraordinary space, and you can feel the history, you can feel the beautiful diversity. There's so much going on in the space. And the music, of course, all of it. And your thurible swinging, and it's a grand place. It's such a joy to be part of the St. James story, you know, for all of us.
Thank you. I have a short funny story about when I first became thurifer.
Oh, let's
John
hear it.
had taught me.
Uh-huh.
And we were all standing in the back of the church getting ready to go, and they didn't use incense very often at all. And so this was a new thing.
If you're listening and you don't know, a thurible is that sort of piece of machinery almost that you put the burning coals in, and then you put the incense in, and it creates the beautiful smoke that you see, and the way that you move it around is something you have to learn. Okay, so there you are at the back of the church.
So we're in the back of the church, and we're getting ready to go in, and the smoke is starting to walk down the aisle a little bit, and all of a sudden there were people. There were a bunch of little old ladies that were coughing. And there was a young curate that was in session, the curate that we had at the time. And he looked over at me and he said, "Too many Protestant noses in this church." And there was not one more cough ever. So anyway, I
love that. That's right. Protestant noses. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I got my start as a Protestant nose, but now I breathe that incense like fuel. It's so extraordinary. It's part of the whole mystique, isn't it?
It is.
I want to thank you so much, Cliff Chally, for being with us tonight and telling us about your two amazing career experiences and how they intertwine and inform one another.
Thank you.
And
it was fun.
Yeah, it was. It was such fun. And blessings. And thank you. And stay well.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Right.
We'll see you soon, I hope.
Yes, see you soon. See you on the live stream.
Bye.